Ayin Beis, Volume 1. We're in the middle of chapter 109, page 212. It's a very dense chapter with a lot of sources. So, to sum up, we're talking about the Pasha of Yaakov and Lavan and the Pasha of Vayetze. Already in the Meorei Ohr Vayishlach, but he's continuing the discussion. And the context, because remember, this in a way you could think it almost as being like a Meorei Ohr, a tangent. The whole thing began a discussion of Sfira from the word Behirus. I've been struggling for translating Behirus because I'm trying to find the translation to put online. I didn't even put it up because I can't find Behirus. So I think I came to it. I found that the Tzemach Tzedek translates Behirus in Yiddish. He says crystal or diamond. He says. So in English, there's a word called crystalline. Crystalline is a very appropriate word for Behirus here. I went through because Behirus means clarity. Behirus means illumination, luminescence, transparent. That's all these correct. But I think crystalline is the right word for it. So no one's ever used that.
How do you translate crystalline?
Behirus.
I knew that was coming. How do they translate it?
Because the key thing was he's talking about the third interpretation. The third interpretation, that's a sapphire, it's a sapphire. The third interpretation of Shfira, the first was number, the second was narrative, misper, sipur, and now even sapir, which means that luminescence. It's really transparent. That's what he wants to say. That the kalim now, in number, the focus is on the quantity, the number. It's more the certain tangible element to that. In the story, yes, we get a deeper story, and even the story of Bligvul, but it's still a story. And as we said, the story doesn't yet tell you the core of it. Still, you're telling a story. So the storyteller is, like I mentioned, that you can tell a story in half an hour of something that took 80 years, or 5 years, or whatever. And here comes Sapir with the Sfiris reveal the real nature of Elokus, the real nature. They're like transparent. So he gave the example in the beginning of chapter 104 of a window, a clear window. And so that's why the word luminescent is not really appropriate, because luminescent means something that's glowing. Like Evan Sapir is the Evan Toiv, that it's a glowing. And the point here is not that the keli is glowing, that the keli is actually transparent and letting the glow from the light go through it. That's why, so to say illuminating or luminescent is not really an accurate word. Even though you say Evan Sapir, you could say, okay, a sapphire glows. But it's more than that. We're talking here more like that it's allowing the light to come through it. So there's there's a translucence, but translucence, the problem with that, it's not transparent. Translucence is letting light through, but it's distorted. I actually did a whole study. You could do an unbelievable, fascinating parallel. You hear Eliezer? Yeah. Between look up transparent, translucence in chemistry, in politics, in economics. These words are used. You can have all the levels of Eidus, Kelim, Parsim, Mosach. They all exist in modalities that are used today in the secular world, the scientific world. So basically, the point here is that Kelim. He wanted to point out that Kelim are here, that the Kelim of the Eidus, they are, as you said, Eina Mastirim ala Eir. So to explain this, he said that the Levushim do conceal. So he basically discussed two types of garments. One is like the body, that's a garment to the soul. So on one hand it's a garment, on the other hand, however, it's attached and reveals the soul. Then there's garments like the clothing we wear on top of our bodies, that's already a garment that's more of a concealer than a revealer. So you have three levels. You have the soul, you have the body, you have the garments on top of the body. Then the same thing with the soul. You have the soul, you have the faculties of the soul, and then you have the garments, machshava, dibra, maisa, the expression of those faculties. So we discussed this. This was earlier. At the end of that discussion, he went back now to understand the story of Lavan and Yaakov. Why am I saying it? Because it's important to be grounded here. Yaakov, Lavan, their encounter is basically an encounter of Kelim and Levushim. That in a healthy structure of how God created the world, everything is structured with, obviously, containers and garments. That's how things flow. Like you said, that MALCHUS and the containers allow the flow to come through, but then you need levushim. You need to have, for example, shoes. When you walk on the ground, we live in a physical world. Even though the leg is not the soul, the physical leg, but it's still too sensitive, so you need to have garments, one more layer. And the same thing in transmission. When you transmit an idea to a student, yes, you need to have kelim. Those are the words, eisius. But then you need examples, because the student is not yet in that paradigm. So basically, all transmission is an energy, container, and garments. So that's normal. That's the normal flow of all of the structure of existence. Fine. The problem becomes now when something is out of balance. So basically, Yaakov's job was to keep this flow going and make the flow intense. That's why Yaakov, what does he do? He works with Tzayin Lavan. Tzayin, sheep, is the word Yitzia. He's bringing out from Lavan, Elyon, the source of the energy, is coming out the sheep. Akudim, Nekudim, Vrudim, is Bria, Yitzir, Nasiya, Haklolim. So that's the cosmic order. Basically, Yaakov Atzilus is drawing down the energies into Bria, Yitzir, Nasiya, the big picture of things. Fine, good. To do so, as we said, he needs to bring in energy that's more than just the regular energy, because the regular energy that creates existence is not enough to really elevate existence. So he brings also an extra amount of energy. This was all discussed in the previous, I'm just summing it up, in the previous mimer. So like you said, he brings all the Giluim, but he also brings them into Kalim, he brings them into the containers, and also through Levushim. Yaakov is the ultimate transmitter of everything, including Levushim. But now comes Lavan. Lavan is the Meorei Ohr, he explained. Meorei Ohr is the higher supernal type of. It's basically the level before Atzilus. We talked which level exactly it is. Anything when you say keser of Atzilus, you're talking usually it means everything before Atzilus. It's a very all-encompassing word. But bottom line, it's higher than Atzilus. You break it down, you could say Meorei Ohr is higher than Akudim, because obviously Akudim Brudim are the same Lavan. But the bottom line is, the higher interpretation of Meorei Ohr is the parsa, is a healthy levush. What levush and garment is that? That's the garment in order to bring from keser into Atzilus. So keser, it's more like you said, Ein Sof. You need to have not just a keli, you need to have also a parsa. What's the parsa's role? So he said the parsa's role is like a riddle. But here it's like engraved letters. So letters and words, remember, are containers. Examples and riddles and metaphors are levushim. But there's a levush that's connected. That's a much healthier levush, a pure levush, because it's containers. Like you see, it's letters, but they're scrambled. So that's the parsa. So they're disorganized, but they're like kike. They're engraved, so they're still made of the same substance called elikus. So now we have Atzilus. That's fine. The second Lavan, meaning the Lavan as he is below, as he's nishtalshel, as he evolves below, is the parsa between Atzilus and Biyah. And in a healthy sense, that's a normal parsa. Also, Malchus has to have garment. The garment is called the nal, chashmal, as he called it, or sandal, the different terms. So this is the garment that allows Malchus, the containers of Malchus, as I said, are still too high, so they need the garment to be able to go into Biyah. Biyah, think of Biyah as the ground, and the nal, the mayof pamayich, and nalayich, there is the shoes that are separated between Malchus. So that's a parsa. But now, here's the thing. Lavan, seeing what Yaakov is up to, and he saw now what Yaakov achieved for 20 years, is threatened. He says, Yida, he's afraid, he's frightened. Because Yaakov has this power to transform the whole Biyah, which basically takes away all of Lavan's purpose. Who he represents his ego. And he doesn't want to have this bittul. Leave me alone. So you don't come here, don't go here. So what he does is, doesn't just create a matzeivah. Yaakov creates a matzeivah. Matzeivah is a healthy thing. That's what we're learning now. We'll soon get to the matzeivah. Lavan creates a gal to block out this energy, to block out the flow from Atzilus into Biyah, and also to not allow Biyah to go back to Atzilus through tshuva and through the mamat lamat. And he said the impact of Lavan basically was that there should be no hiserus of Baal Tshuva. He says those words. That Lavan wanted no awakenings. He didn't want anyone to become inspired. Whoever is in the holy world stays in the holy world. Whoever is not is stuck. So now, that was chapter 108. And 109, what we're learning now, is a discussion what exactly is what Yaakov did with the matzeivah. Before we go, so what is he saying? So basically, he made a matzeivah not a gal, because Yaakov is kedusha. He wants to bring holiness into the world. That also needs to be transmitted level by level by level. So what does Yaakov do? Yaakov takes a stone. The stone is representative of Malchus as a nekudah. So think of it as the material world before it's realized. The raw matter. Heaven is raw matter. Or in the levels of Atzilus, it's Malchus of Atzilus without just a nekudah. And he wants to make the nekudah, he wants to start filling it up with divine energy, basically. The first thing you do is make a matzeivah. This is making it into a partzuf. That's the word. You make a nekudah into a partzuf. What does it mean in simple terms? Think of it like a student who's just coming for the first time to learn by his teacher. So all he is a nekudah. He's undeveloped. He has no revelation. He's a receptive container. Malchus. Nekudah. So there's bittul, there's receptivity. Now you have to fill him with something. So Yaakov takes the Evan and turns it into matzeivah. That means Malchus is trying to get a Meorei Ohr, a revelation. Or like a new moon that is now starting to grow. Now, the big discussion at the beginning of the chapter that we had learned already was that even though he says keser Malchus is the nekudah. So keser Malchus is the beginning point of Malchus, is just keser Malchus. Then you have to make it into a matzeivah. So matzeivah in a way is like a parser between keser in Malchus itself and the lower levels, just for the record. Now, in Malchus, keser Malchus. Now, to bring chokhmah, bina, and so on into Malchus, you bring it down. But to bring it down, you got to go up. So you have to dig deeper. That's what he says, because to have this Meorei Ohr, yeah. That's what he said was shcheirani.
To raise something higher, you need more energy.
That's not what he says here. That's different, my mother. That's not, I would say here. That's not what he's saying here. Not to raise it higher. Not because they're raising it higher.
He wants to pick it up to go higher to
I mean, and maybe you misunderstood what you said. Sometimes it says, whatever falls lower, you have to pick up higher. This is not lower. This is more that in order to bring in energy in a place that is just a nekudah, that's bittul, you need to have a more power. Not so much the lower. That's not, I wouldn't focus on the word lower, because really, actually, keser Malchus is higher. But, you mean to say lower as in revealing it to lower levels. Okay, fine. Good. So basically, it's only yud b'china shachris. It's only a yud, a nekudah, and it's busy. Then I did the Torah lemivla, meaning the student is then in a state of complete receptivity. When you're busy absorbing, you can't be busy transmitting. Okay. Yeah. So then, in order to bring it out to be revealed, you need to have a revelation. And he brought a few. He brought the Meorei Ohr Bolak is what I just said. Shcheirani. That's Shcheirani. Okay, that is dark. And then Then he brings the Zohar that we said from Vayishlach. What did he say? The high ruche is pastusa the high nekudah shezeh dafke. That in order to have the expansion of that nekudah of Malchus, you need to have an addition of katishin uberchan mila'ela, more holiness and transmissions and blessings from above. Okay. And that's what we have on Shabbos. On Shabbos you have that type of more transmissions that comes without the hefsek of the parsa. The parsa is somewhat pierced. So you have additional flow. That's what he says here. So right. So it's only passing through the parsa, through the curtain, and not in a manifest way. That's on Shabbos. And the regular weekday, it still goes through the parsa. So this is what Yaakov is doing. He's bringing to Malchus more revelation. That means he's bringing levels that are higher than the parsa, and that is the process of the expansion, the kima of Malchus, as I said, the raising, the uplifting of Malchus. Okay.
This is only on Shabbos?
On Shabbos more than always. I'm just doing a summary here. So then he goes on to explain that the root of Malchus is in radlo, which is the highest level. And that's why it's only in nekudah, because radlo is higher than expansion. It's beyond knowledge. So therefore it manifests in a nekudah, which is also without any giluyim, without any manifestation, as I explained. But in order for this to go, you need to get something higher. And he said that you could say that in radlo itself there's two levels. One is chitzenius, the outer, and one is the inner. So Malchus itself, the nekudah, the even, the stone, is from the chitzenius of radlo. It's from a lower level. And in order to bring into Malchus the expanding of it, turning it into matzeivah, into a marker, you need the pnimius. And then the final thing that we had learned, which I'm leading into where we're up to, is from the Zohar. This is from the Tzemach Tzedek explains the Zohar. He says, "Maman dishtai menuhuda dezivu la." Let me just tell you what it says there. The Zohar has the question. I'm not going to review the Eitz Chaim. I did that already. The whole Eitz Chaim that it comes from a higher place in order to have the 10th sphere. But the Zohar says a similar thing. How do you get the 10th spheres? He says, "Maman dishtai menuhuda dezivu la." So he says, in order to fulfill Malchus, that it should come revealed, you need to have the Yechudim, the work that's done in the higher spheres, and that creates new energy that lifts Malchus up. And in other places it says this comes from Shleimus HaAtzmus, that the divine, the God, the essence of the core of the divine, encompasses everything. That gives the power to give into Malchus all its energy, and not just remain just a spark or a point. And he gave the example. This example is from Eira Teira. So that's what we learned last. Let me review the example. Like he said, like a king, the day of this child's marriage, he's in great joy. And because of his great joy, out of him comes a surge, an abundance, a flow of all his faculties. And everybody is equal. The Ikar Gili is Mizgala, he reveals himself to everyone, Katan Kadal, from small to great, and even to people who are inferior in nature, who don't even appreciate the king. And how does he reveal himself to them? By speaking. He tells stories, he shares, he's in this expansive mode. And in this, what he shares is a very deep thing, but they only understand the external of it, but nevertheless, he shares. So he says, that's where we ended. I'll just read from here. Movim is Beis Dvarim. From this example, I'll read the whole example again. I'm reading from 4th line on the top. Umavur Sham is Eira Teira Tetzava. You want to know exactly. Omed Aleph Tofrei Shir Aleph. Okay, page 1611. So what does he say? He gives an example. Example for what? We're looking for an example that you reach deeper in order to bring a revelation, even to the outer levels. You need to reach deeper in. Right. Second. Okay. So he says like this. Here's the mashal. Mavur mashal al zeh kamei kasher b'simcha gedela b'chasun b'nei yukadema. King who's a great joy, great exuberation, great delight at the wedding of his son. Similar and kedema, so similar. Hine oz ba b'nafshe ira gili b'tesus meruba made. Then in his nefesh, in his spirit, comes a type of surge. Come to his nefesh a type of eir v'gili b'tesus meruba made, a very intense, increasingly powerful revelation and light. Till all his faculties, to the extent that all his faculties just come pouring out, are all very openly revealed. Something that usually are concealed. They are concealed. And the primary place they reveal themselves is when he reveals himself to all kekot kegadol, from small to great, to young to old, or from small to great. Even to people who are inferior relatively. Who don't at all understand the greatness of the king and his wisdom. And how does he reveal himself to them? He reveals himself by telling many stories and speaking much according to their level. And in these words is concealed, is manifest and clothed many great exalted ideas. And even though they don't understand it because of the being enclosed and being concealed, nevertheless it comes out in dibur, and they do hear the words. It's not completely, they hear the words. And we understand from this two things. The first thing, that because of the abundant and the increasing energy, it comes into a revelation that's more than regular, more than the measured regular. For Eid Yuvan, the second thing we learn, that this abundant, overabundant energy, that's more than the regular flow, it cannot be revealed in an intimate, internal way, only through speaking, which is only a levush chetzeni b'lvad. In other words, it's not that he can reveal his depth of his wisdom that they'll get it. He does it through stories, through speaking. So you know two things: that it's a very high energy, and that energy, that flow, expresses itself in a very external way.
What does Gili Yosef mean? Just more than usual?
Yeah. And he adds in the parentheses, and in this chitzeni, even though it's chitzeni, there in dafke here you have the exalted ideas from the inner dimension, higher than Gili HaSeichel. So on one hand, it's expressing itself in external, but also he's like adding a point that it's something Yosef Medai. But even in the external, you have something that you don't have if he was, let's say, teaching. Because teaching, it would have to be somewhat limited in its flow. But why? Let's understand this why. Because of its heightened level, it can only express itself in dibur. The parentheses.
Why can't you express yourself in a more pneumistic way?
There's it. For Ayin Yuvan, 1 second. For Ayin Yuvan, Shagili Yesem Medaya Nasam is a Irsh Shiyah B'chinas His Galas Apnimis like B'chinas Dibur. Okay, yeah, that's good. Why what?
Why is it so?
Why is what so?
To express a higher thing has to be expressed darkly in a dibur.
Well, but the simple reason is because you're dealing here. If he was only dealing with his best students and the greatest minds in his kingdom, then he could explain it to them and so on. You're dealing with people who will not understand, but yet they do get something that spills over, so to speak. Let's put this: when the king is regular without a simcha, then generally he's just in his own inner chamber. He has his ministers, he has, let's say, his students that he explains things to. Fine, great. When he's besimcha gdela, it's not suddenly that everybody's suddenly now equal. You're really equal. They're not. He is just now in a state of overflowing. So he's just revealing. So the most he could do is tell stories. Within it is all the depth. They'll get what they get. So you have both things. It's an abundant thing, but it's expressed like that. No, but he doesn't have the power to actually transform the pchusei erech to suddenly become great scholars.
But don't we say that when something is too great to be revealed, it often can't be done in words? It has to be done with an embrace and dancing. That the words aren't.
I think it's the same thing. I think he's saying the same. Relatively speaking, you're right. There's some things the words would be through embrace and dancing with them. But in speaking itself, stories, the way he speaks, the Meorei Ohr is similar. That's all he's saying. It's correct, but it's not only embrace. He could tell stories. The fact is, he could, and that also has more than teaching, so to speak. Now the moral of this. The machmas b'chinas haribui v'ateisun b'chinas poshut atzmas ein sof. He's now explaining, how you make from an even a matzeivah. He's explaining that's a serious process. It's not just a simple matter. To take from a nekudah, let's use an example. A Rebbe has the power, is born with and has within himself a tremendous amount of power. But then he wants to bring this power out and affect other people that are not on his level. So in his nekudah, his malchus, things are pretty good. It's like radlo. But there's no expansion. It's like a private thing. He's in his own little chamber, and he has this level of intensity. But he has to now express himself. So you could think expressing himself consists only of concealment and only of diminishment. The answer is no. To express it to lower levels, to express it in a way that malchus, this nekudah of the stone, becomes a matzeivah, which means a marker that can be appreciated by others is coming from a very even deeper place than his being just a nekudah, just being in his own inner space, so to speak. That's what he's saying here.
Is that different than?
So Yishle.
Is that different than just a regular? I'm not saying different from Rabbi to regular teacher, but different than the regular example that would say that a teacher who has to transmit to the students has to just be mitzvahs and whatever it is, even though it's coming from a higher place.
The same. It's general idea is the same, but here he's talking far higher levels than that. In order to bring it to lower levels, you need to have a deeper expression, for sure. But here he's definitely talking, he didn't even use that, because clearly this is on a different quality, for sure. Let's see how he's going here, but this is about bringing, because it goes back to the nekudah HaMalchus, to make it into matzeivah, so you should be able to be mamshech into biyah. Let's see where he goes here with the nimshal, we'll see. The moral of this is the machmas like he said, he brought before on the top of the page from Teres Chaim Vayhi Kol Haaretz Sofachas. So what does he say there? He says there that God, let me just explain what he says because it's very important to what he's going to say now. There, Atzmus is lav mikol midas in huklal. He's beyond any type of definition or identity or midas or anything like that. Right? Antu chad. He's beyond it all. But then he created a world of multiplicity. Infinite multitudes. The question, of course, is how do we take these multitudes and return it there? So there's a process where first the multitudes are all separate. That's called his chalkus. He speaks about the der hafloga. That's the Maimer is about. The der hafloga, that first they all spoke one language. Then it was broken down. They all got confused. Bavel, their language was confused. So now we have diversity, which of course leads to the beginning of all divisiveness. You can't speak the same language, which of course doesn't just mean the same physical language. It means you can't speak the same language. Period. The problem we have till this day, as they say, we don't speak the same language. And the kavanah, of course, is the purpose of it all is, as we said before, is to unite, even within the diversity, to find that we can find commonality. Even as you speak in Spanish and Russian and Chinese and French and English and Yiddish and Hebrew, and find commonality until a point where it comes l'asad lovi. We learned in the previous chapter, oz epech kolamim sofa bruda, that all the nations will. Doesn't say that. Even though some say everyone will speak Hebrew, but it's not just a matter of language. It means they'll speak the same language. That's the point. They'll find the unity in there, but it'll still be different nations. Sofa bruda, like you said before, sofa bruda, love de kulam shechem echad, to serve one God. So the bottom line is that it's about diversity. Now within diversity, now the interesting thing is when the unity comes into diversity, is a deeper dimension than when it's alone. Because the fact that everyone speaks the same language, or l'chatchila initially there's oneness, is oneness. But to find harmony when there could be divisiveness and still find that type of thing, you need a deeper energy. So he explains in Teres Chaim there that comes from Atzmus. Because Atzmus is higher than the multiplicity. He's higher than the unity. He has everything. So when that's transmitted, that everything affects the distinctions to also appreciate each other. You understand? Because his achdus therefore permeates all the distinctions, because they're all getting an energy from a place that's beyond distinction. So the key, basically, in communication, it means you're not trying to find a compromise and say, you give in a little, I give in a little. You're trying to find a deeper place where we both realize, that we really come from a source that's beyond these distinctions. That's where real hiskalos come from. In other words, hiskalos, when you have, let's say, 5 Jews and 5 opinions, or 5 people and 5 opinions, or 2 opinions, there's 3 ways this can go, or maybe 4 ways even. One annihilates the other. That's one way. The other one annihilates the first one. That's way 2. That's basically one category. Okay, so there's annihilation. That's war and conquest. Another way is each gives in. You give him 50%, I give him 50%, and then yes, you have coexistence, but you've not really created unity. You've created. We'll both weaken our positions because we both benefit from this.
Negotiate.
Right. And the third approach is real hiskalus. That's when you say hakosav ashlishi machriya b'neihem. The third pasuk comes and reconciles. It doesn't say I'm 2 against 1. It's finding something that both of them say, you know what? The truth is we complement each other. We don't have to give up anything. By us joining together, we become both of us stronger in our own way. That has to come from a place that's higher than the distinction. It's like the composer that tells the musical notes, you don't have to fight with each other. You're all part of one great music, and no one's giving up anything. Or it's like the body. So you have 75 trillion cells. Or nature. We have different organs. And a healthy being, it's not like the heart says, you know what, who's dominating today? Is it me or is it you? The answer is, my friend, we're all part of a bigger picture. By you being you, we become greater. I don't want you to become me. So it's understanding of Eskalus and Eschalkus that comes from a place of Shleimus and Kula, because Atzmos has it all. And one is not more or less than the other. You don't need, one thing doesn't have to be diminished for the other one to. You don't have to be wrong for me to be right. Let's put it that way. And again, we're talking obviously a distinction that is holy. Not talking about obviously if someone's a murderer, it sounds like he has a right. We're talking within the context of God's plan, diversity within that plan. Yeah. If you're off the reservation, it's another story. A person says, we're talking about within the context of, look, it's e pluribus unum, as the Rebbe would say, from many one. Which means is the many remain many, and they join as one force. Bottom line is 7 billion people in the time of Mashiach will not all have one opinion. They'll have 7 billion opinions, but their bittul to a higher source will be such that we will not have the ego and the jealousness. Everyone will understand their role, just like the organs in the body each understand their role. The chiddush is organs in the body don't have free will, and we do. Or like musical notes in large composition. You got to challenge this, huh?
Yeah, I have to challenge things here. I know it's very. The thing you were saying about
you challenge because you have to. It sounds too perfect, too good.
But otherwise, as long as, the key was what you meant by as long as they're on the reservation.
Obviously, no. God forbid if one organ is a cancer. Cancer that says, listen, I want to eat up your cells. That's not acceptable. We're talking about there has to be the bittul. Everybody has to submit to a plan. Like let's put it this way. I'm always fascinated by this. One of the most egotistic industries in the world is the media, is film. You look at the end of a film, how many credits are there? It rolls and rolls and rolls. There's thousands of names on that thing. Now I know how hard it's to get together a few people to agree on something. You get those thousands of people, and we all know they probably went through many wars. Most films don't get done because they fall apart. So because you can no way to make a film with 2 people or 1 person. You need every one of those names. Some have more major roles, smaller roles. And the fact of the matter is, because at some point it's win-win, in a healthy environment, you take away, obviously there I'm not saying bittul prevails, there maybe it's money that prevails, but some equalizer that everybody realized you have a director, does not mean a good parent, a good director, a good educator does not take sides and say, oh, you're the better students. You find in each one the quality that they contribute and only they can contribute. And they appreciate them absolutely, because only you can do what you have to do. That's the way God created the universe. Why is each snowflake different? Why is each creature different? Because God is secure, and He put a piece of Himself in everything. It's your role to figure out how you're all one big piece of me. The problem is when you start get focused on your independent identity, so you don't relate to that. That's what He says in Teres Chaim, which is based on the Alter Rebbe. The whole world was one language. That one day, that's the point, is to find within Tachtenim, show people in their self-interest how their self-interest leads them to understand that we're part of one bigger picture without you being compromised. Yes, what you have to give up is your own tivus and selfish narcissism. That's not what we're talking here. We're not talking about indulging yourself. We're talking about your unique identity doesn't mean it has to be the way you want it to be. That's not what we're discussing now. We're discussing diversity in a holy way. Okay, so now he explains. So he says like this. This is the mashal. So how do you get that? How do you get, now that you have a nekudah, malchus is only a nekudah, how does that expand it into a matzeivah? It's only an evan, like a nekudah. So he answers that because machmas b'chinas hadibu teis b'chinas poshad atzmas ein ensach. Ayidei yechudim da'atzilis. Through the aveda natzilis, which is what Yaakov did. Through your yechudim, through chochmah, bina, learning Torah, working with chesed, tzedakah, and so on and so forth, that draws down from the air poshet, that's higher than the diversity. creates a flow, a surge of energy more than the regular. And that gili, like in the mashal, has to express itself through dibur, which is malchus, elam hadibur, speech. So malchus is an outer level. And this itself, it comes from b'chinas primis atzmas ein sof v'yizgal l'aseh and be revealed in the future v'nigla kvei davaya, when the glory of God will be revealed. Yesh leimer. Okay, 1 second. That exactly like in the example. So the only difference between the only thing, where's the simcha in the moral? The simcha in the moral is the yichudim. Remember, what brings the joy of the king? It's his child's wedding. What is that? Naveda, that's when we do the yichudim, which is, I guess, marriage. When we do the yichudim through our, meaning the unifications that we do through mitzvahs and through our aveda, in Atzilus, that draws down so-called a deeper joy, a deeper pleasure, a deeper transmission from the root, which in turn expresses itself in dibur all the way to the lowest levels in the Evan, but it brings out the deepest levels. In that you have the deepest expression.
Also?
I don't know. Not necessarily. I mean, it's probably included in there. Here is definitely an additional element than regular yichud zon. Yesh leimer the nekudah malchus u'b'chinas ayin shenetzel b'atzilus. Now he explains. Yesh leimer, this nekudah malchus, which again is as the evan that becomes a matzeivah, the stone that becomes a marker. U'b'chinas ayin shenetzel b'atzilus. Interesting expression. Ayin shenetzel b'atzilus means a bittul, a type of nullification, nothingness, that's emanated in Atzilus. But let's explain. What does this mean? Tehina Atzilus u'b'chinas yesh netzel. Atzilus on its own doesn't have this. Atzilus on its own is a yesh netzel. It's an entity that's emanated from that emanation. V'gam b'chinas chachma ksiv ha'chachma ma'ayin timotza liyesh. Also chachma, the highest level of Atzilus. We'll soon explain what this yesh means. I'll explain in a moment. You say chachma ma'ayin timotza. So you say chachma is coming from ayin. What means coming from ayin? It means chachma is a yesh coming from an ayin. The meaning of yesh here, let's just explain, is not the yesh of biyah. The yesh in biyah, as we said, is a nifrid. In biyah, you're an independent entity. In Atzilus, there's no independent entity. It's all godliness. But it's godliness manifest in a structure. Chochmah is now chochmah. It's not unconscious wisdom. It has tangible wisdom. So that's the meaning of yesh here. Not yesh as an ego and his personal agendas. Yesh meaning identification. So I just want to the very important qualification. So remember, he's being very, very bekitzer here, but I want to go back to something that's fundamental through the whole hemshech here. I don't know if you remember this, but if you don't, please ask me, because I can elaborate a lot about this. This is like pages and pages. A big part of the hemshech Ayin Beis was about two things: whether Atzilus is Gilui Helam or Yesh Ma'ayin. Basically, in simple English, it means whether the spheres, are they a revelation of higher levels and just coming out from the concealed to the revealed, or they're a new entity? Let me explain what means new. New meaning they don't have the personality of the divine. I've said this many times. The mistake that many of us have when we learn this, they teach us Yesh Ma'ayin means creation from nothing. And Atzilus is not a creation from nothing. Ohr is not Yesh Ma'ayin. But when you start thinking about what does that mean? Either everything comes from God, or nothing comes from. What does that mean? Some things come from God differently. What does it really mean when you say this is Yesh Ma'ayin and this is Gilui Helam? What does it even mean? The real meaning of it is obviously everything comes from Atzmus. So in that sense, everything is Yesh Ma'ayin, because compared to Atzmus, everything is meaningless. Doesn't need it. So everything is in that sense type of. The difference is the question is how they come out of Atzmus. One knows Atzmus, and one is aware of it, and it permeates its being, is constantly aware of its source. And the other one feels that it's a separate entity. A table is Yesh Ma'ayin, not because it comes from God just like Ein Sof does. But the table doesn't testify to God. The table is as my own independent identity. In Biyah, there's an independence going on, a nifrid. It still recognizes, by the way, even Biyah knows it's coming from a source, but that's really knowing. Atzilus feels it. It's like the difference between, do we know we have a soul? Yes. But do you understand that you have a soul? Do you understand its personality? No, we understand materialism. I just know there's some energy inside of me That's how Biyah knows godliness. Atzilus knows soul like we know physical things. It's one with it. But it's still an entity that emerged from God. So you go Lifnei HaTzimtzum, you don't even have that. Lifnei HaTzimtzum is complete divine consciousness. Nothing exists. It's a divine envisioning what he wants. Which is also a necessary step because that's how we connect with the divine on the terms of God. But after a Tzimtzum, basically is now beginning an emergence of identities. Now, the identity comes completely. When the Rebbe is a Rebbe, they say the Merkava Telakus. What does it mean? He's an identity. He's absolutely an identity. He's not, doesn't exist. Or else, he's not an illusion. Moshe was Moshe. He was a man in a body. Mashiach is a human being in a body. So you have to say he's an identity. However, his whole identity is Bittul Telakus. He's like Atzilus. He's like Eres V'Kelim of Atzilus. Completely transparent channel to the divine will. 24/7. But he exists. You can't call him no Yesh. That's what means Yesh. Yesh meaning identity here. Then there's a person who's besides that also has his own agenda. He's not 24/7 aligned. Once in a while he gives God he throws him a few scraps or whatever it is. Or more or less. We're not talking about the level of it. That's what he means here. That's why so the point when we say Atzilus on its own is an identity. What Yaakov did, we're going to learn, is he took this identity and introduced and said, even Atzilus, you should know, you're also Batul Telakus, because you're still an identity, and Atzmus is higher than identity. You understand what I'm saying? And in Biyah, the accomplishment is not only are you an identity that's divine, but even you're not a separate, you have your own agenda, you don't have your own agenda.
So you said there were two things, there's Gilead Halim and there's Yesh Me'ayin? Atzilus is which one?
Both. What he said earlier is that first he began that the Eiris are Gilead Halim and the Kalim of Atzilus are Yesh Me'ayin, because the Eir reflects more the divine source, and the Kalim reflect more the identity of Chesed and Gvura. But then he said that even the Eir has also Chesed and Gvura, and even the Kalim are also Iyu v'Gamur Echad, are also rooted in the divine.
Before Atzilus, everything.
You're going to have to learn the beginning of Ayin Beis. This is like maybe 40 pages to talk just about this subject. I just summed it up here. What are you asking?
Just about that. If Gilead Halim is like everything before Atzilus is just strictly that Gilead Halim?
There's no strictly anything in this. Everything is relative. So let's remember that. There's no strictly. Everything depends what you're talking about. It's all relative to one another. If you talk complete, pure Atzmus, everything is Yesh Me'ayin. Because Atzmus is beyond even Eir. It's not Atzmus, as it says, Loize Ikad, it's not the primary role of God is to transmit Eir even. If you talk on that level. If you're talking about how God manifests in existence, it all depends on the levels. It basically comes down to, let me be even more precise. When we say Yesh Me'ayin Gilead Halim, it's not just what I said, the personality. Like, for example, a Sefer Torah, why is it holier than a table? They both are made of the same material object. As a matter of fact, the Torah scroll was once part of an animal that had no holiness in it. It was an animal. They took its leather, tanned it, whatever, etc., and turned it into cloth. So it's a process, how you do it. What exactly happened? The answer is you took something that was a nifrid, that was on its own, basically in the world of chil. I'm not saying necessarily negative, but not positive. And God has the power to change it by elevating its sparks. What you're doing is making it an entity that becomes a channel for the divine. The fact that we don't see it, that's because we look with physical eyes. But it's now a channel. It's now like it's a chefetz of dusha, it's like Atzilus a little Atzilus in this world. Not exactly, but you get the idea. And when Mashiach comes, we'll be able to see it with our own physical eyes. But you've sanctified a part of your life, part of the existence. Now, the key thing to remember, however, is why is this distinction critical? For the obvious reason. Because someone can say, you know what, everything is God. I don't need a Sefer Torah. I'll worship this table. Why do I have to stand up for a Sefer Torah and holy? I'll be who I am. I also have the divine within me. Or like what the Frankistans said, Jacob Frank. They said, let's go, the deepest sparks are in the most illicit places, so let's have orgies and let's do the whole thing. That's, of course, not only dangerous, it's hepech of whole kavanah. To say, because Atzmus wants Tachtenim, so let's go into Tachtenim and indulge as much as we can. That's where you're going to... Yeah, but then you'll be trapped in there, and you'll never get out of there. So that's why Yiddishkeit has the other side of things. That's like, there are people who have a lot of Avos Hashem, but they don't have Yiras Hashem. They love everything. I love everything. What about Yira? Yira means, one second, Atzmus is beyond all of this. So that's the beauty. If you look in other mystical systems, you'll find there's either everything is God, or nothing is God. If you want to find God, you got to leave this material world. The beauty in Chassidus is that both are correct. Everything, you do not have to leave. There's no asceticism. The divine will be revealed there, but you cannot have a state of mind of the world. You have to elevate it to up there. And that contradiction, seemingly, because you could say which one is it, is really the two kavim of Yesh Mayin and Gilei Helm, recognizing. On one hand, this is very distant from God. God is a completely different reality. On the other hand, He's very close. So there are elements in our lives where we reveal something that's there already, and the other things where we realize an infinite distance. So there's always respect and integration type of thing. There's always awe and love. Basically, Av and Yira. Any good relationship also is based on this, by the way. Because when you love somebody, this doesn't mean one person swallows up the other. It means that you both have distinct identities, but you become like this, like two circles that become one. Not one as one annihilates the other. To do that, you have to have the space that distinguishes between one another, and you have to have the times that you're completely intimate and one. Like the Rebbe said to a couple, that if you're close when you should be distant, you'll be distant when you should be close. So you have to have, this is the constant dance of Ratzeh and Shuv, is the constant dance of diversity finding harmony. I did, because it now is it's a divine force revealed, an extension, like you stand up for a Talmud Chacham who learn Torah. Not because he's greater, because within him he has now revealed Elikus. Now I said revealed, not to our eyes, because we have problems. Our eyes are also blinded. But what you've done is, what I'm trying to say is that you've made a Yesh Ma'ayin Nivra into a Netzah, basically. That's what I was saying. You made something that was on its own independent entity that only feels itself. You made it now to being a divine thing. That's what you mean. That's really what means kedushin, by the way. When you hegdish, when you mekadosh something with your mind, what did you do? You took it out of the domain of chayil and you made it in the domain of kedush. What does it mean in Chassidus? It means you took it from being a separate so-called self or self-absorbed entity into becoming now dedicated to a divine cause, and that's where you can't take it back.
Even though you can't see Bein Abus.
Yeah, the Ein Bus, because your Ein Bus is also that domain of Chel, so you only still see, you see what you are. But listen, like it says, the Maggid was able to see an Akeli who made it. A tzaddik can see something, can see Kedusha. I mean, it's like an energy. It's an energy level.
Tzaddik will see the table that has a Vayan. Tzaddik will see the table.
Yeah, but it will not see the same. Well, he'll see one as being like a nivra that's waiting to be, waiting, and other he'll see as actually already aligned. I mean, it would be like the difference between a stone that's already part of the Beis HaMikdash and a stone in the street that could become part of the Beis HaMikdash. It's not the same thing. One is possible, one is actual. I mean, to put it in simple aces. A second before you sanctify it, it's possibility. So what will he see physically? You have to say, basically, look, the divine sparks are everywhere, but the question is the entity itself, from its perspective, sees itself as me. It doesn't see itself, I am an extension of the divine. Well, essentially what we do, when we take a piece of bread and we wash and we make Baruch Atah Shem Hameitzi Lechem Min Haaretz, you're taking bread that was created by God. It has a spark. Lo Lechem Levadi Yichyi Adam. You don't live on the bread, you live on the spark. But what you're doing is, you have, in effect, revealed the real purpose of this bread, which is really Meitzi Lechem Min Haaretz. It's the Meitzi Lechem Min Haaretz. And both Mitzad Gavra and Mitzad Chefza. First of all, right now you're eating it L'Shem Shemaim, you're eating it for a good purpose. You'll use the energy to help someone instead of hurting someone. So simply on that sensitive level. And also something is done with the bread itself. You're elevating it to a place that is aligned. Now, when the whole world will be aligned to that divine, that's what you have. Is like was it in Gan Eden by Matan Torah, and Lasud Lavi in the fullest sense of the word. We believe that technology exists today, based on the Zohar. The reason that we're so easy for us to create communication is that we can speak to people anywhere in the world. You can access anything, anytime, anywhere, everything, anytime, anywhere. Is because matter and spirit, which is the essence of technology, that they're able to reveal the energy within existence into objects, was revealed through thousands of years of hard Aveda, where we broke the chemer, the material world's resistance was broken, that opened it up, so today we're able to access technology. That's an example. That was something we could see with our eyes. Open your eyes, you could see that. Technology is not an accident. That the fact that the Industrial Revolution in 1840, that suddenly there was an acceleration of so many things within a period of 100 years, and now it's even faster. When 1,000 years before that, it was not commensurate. It was not like every year. It was just an explosion. Well, he says in Zohar that in the year Tafresh, but that's not an accident. That's because of all the work that refines the mezachich, the chemer hagas. You work on the harder outer levels. At some point, the energy begins to flow, and you see it in freedom, in democracies. You see it in technology. You see it in the fall of the Soviet Union. By the Rebbe, the fall of the Soviet Union was not just a nice thing he attached. He saw that directly as a result of thousands of years of work. Edom was weakened. The Esav was weakened, and it took thousands of years to do that. Well, it was called Russia in our time. Before it was called Rome. Before that it was called Germany, England, Spain. Who cares? That's already the names. But when you see it from that perspective, it's not like, I saw the Soviet Union, but the tzaddikim were waiting for these things. You see the Rebbe Rashab Sichos when he talks about the nations. They knew it's coming. When you see it, it was like for them, finally, we finished another bitter type of thing. By us, it's the other way around. We're so consumed with the moment. Someone says, so Soviet Union fell. Wow, that's nice. Okay. I'm just trying to point out, it's a difference when you look you see the patterns, or from the, exactly right. Okay, so fine. So going back to Gilead Helam and Yesh Mayin, so bottom line is, the end of the day is Atzilus is both. The real answer is like this. Compared to Bligvul, even the Eres of Atzilus are Yesh Mayin. And compared to the Eir HaGvul, the Shir Atzmi B'Koyach, that's what we talk, the 10 hidden spheres, Atzilus is Gilead Helam. So it's all going back to that type of thing. Why is this all relevant here? Because the spheres that we're talking about, we're now talking about crystalline, right? Crystallizing, transparency. A transparency of what? That Chesed and Gvur is transparent what? It's revealing to us, number one, that there's obviously the godliness within the spheres, but also that God is beyond. Remember we learned earlier, even Sipur, even the story of the spheres tells us that there's an element that is Mevin Davar Meteich Davar. Remember that we learned about, that you come to realize that there's an element that is completely beyond the structure. But now we're talking in a much clearer way, and this is what Yaakov was beginning to do. He took an Evan, turned it into matzeivah, and what he's saying now is that this power to do this, to make this nekudah, what does he say here? So Dafka comes from a higher power. He's expanding. He's revealing in the nekudah of malchus, which is the kelim of malchus. He's revealing the more energy, more light. So even though it's going down, but it's revealing that it's coming from a greater, higher place. That's what he's saying here. And even Chachma is ma'ayin timatz. Even Chachma is ma'ayin, like we learned. Even the Eir of Chachma. Malchus he bechinas ayin. And Malchus is the level of ayin. Why? Because Chachma is an identity. Chachma is wisdom. Malchus has nothing of its own. That's what he's saying now. Vagam the Chachma. Okay, so therefore Malchus is bittul. Its lack of, remember we said, where does Malchus's bittul come from? From Reisha de Leis Yada. So its simplicity comes from the root of simplicity. Follow? So Malchus has this power that Chachma doesn't have. But as we said, there's also, now we're bringing Chachma into Malchus, which we'll see in a second, okay? Vagam the Chachma hi yud d'shem avaya b'chinas nekudah levad, and even though it says, I think someone asked this question, that Chachma, you asked, is the yud of Shem Avaya. We know in the spheres, Chachma is yud, Bina is hey, Midis Za is vav, and the Malchus is the last hey. So the Chachma is yud is bittul.
The whole time we're saying that Malchus is yud.
Or bittul, right? Exactly. He said yud also, I think, earlier. Yes, yud. It's the yud of what he said, matzeivah. Yeah. So here's the vart. So the answer is Mekol Mokim. I'm sorry, Mavur Gamkein. It also is explained in the nekudah seyed Mekol Mokim b'tzir reis. Even the point of a yud is also the shape of a letter. It's not no shape. There's no shapelessness. Aval nekudah the keser he nekudah blitzir klal.
Like when we were discussing about
The nekudah of keser, we spoke about this. You asked this question about point before you last class. The point of keser has no shape at all. Yeah, essentially, yeah. He's saying keser right now, but that's right. And the same thing with malchus because it's rooted in lo yada.
like we were saying about the
So there's two types of right. There's two nekudas. There's a nekudah that has a shape. A yud has a shape. Thank you. And then there's a nekudah point that has no shape.
Which is called social unit.
Yeah, in some places that's what it's called. Yeah.
Which is a point which they, according to math, doesn't take any space.
Yeah, but here nekudah could be even not the crazy. Right. Here's the point that takes no space, whereas a yud does take a space. Bottom line, in yud itself, there's two levels. That's what's going on here. Let's go on. Canal, like we said before. Thank you. Okay, this again is very dense and very, very. He doesn't explain everything here. That's why I'm elaborating. So we have now two types of bittul: the bittul of chachma, the bittul of keser. Later, we're going to learn this at length. He's really being very summarized, very concentrated. Right. Okay. Another place it's explained the b'chinas ma the chachma b'chinas ayin the keser shenimtze bein hanem tzolim. Elsewhere explains this gets even more the plot thickens. The ma of chachma, remember, chachma itself is made up of two words. Koyach ma, power, faculty of ma. Ma is bittul. Koyach reflects more koyach, a faculty. Let me give an example so we're not just talking esoteric here. When an idea falls into your head, do you ever think where that idea comes from? Right? Like a second before the idea fell into your head, you wouldn't even know where. Now you suddenly no idea. And you try to trace the steps, you can't. Because it's like almost like someone threw something into your window, and you look out the window, there's no one there. Well, that's more yesh ma'ayin, you could say, ma'ayin, ted matzah. I mean, that has both elements, the truth is. It has both elements. So there's an element where you focus on the idea. Okay, what idea? I just had an idea for a new way to spread your futzamayna sechach chutz. I'm speaking to Eliezer now.
why only to him?
He knows why. Because he's got ideas all the time. This guy is constantly, he's like, what's it called? There's those, what's the word? Well, we all have ideas, but there's an expression, huh?
The machine that never stopped moving.
Yeah, there's like these idea machines, whatever. Anyway, I'm talking to all of us. So you have an idea, and you could be focusing on the idea. So you know what, this is a great idea. Let me call somebody up. Let me call up my lawyer, my accountant. Let's turn this into a business plan. But then you could also be focusing on the awe. Where did this idea come from? Unbelievable. Why God blessed me to have this idea. So the focus there is on the ayin, the ma, wow. The wow type of thing. Like almost the hafla. We'll learn about this a lot later. The hafla, like the awe of it. And then there's the focus, how the chachma begins to, how you turn it into bina, and so on. But there's a moment that a person should have. Reishis chachma yiras Hashem. The beginning of wisdom is always knowing there's a God before this. Where did this idea come from? Don't think it's just your, innovation. Keep the eyes on the green now, because I see this is. Let me know. Okay. So now he's saying like this. He's saying elsewhere it explains that b'chinas mav chachma b'chinas ayin the keser. So he's saying that's the ayin of keser. Because where did chachma come from? Where did conscious idea came from? From an unconscious place, which is in keser. So the ayin of chachma, that chachma has that element of bittul, because we know chachma is bittul, like he says in Tanya. And bina is already I understand. Chachma is still the idea that remember we spoke just like lo yada manifests in nekudah. The same thing.
get it from the higher source.
Okay. Let me just repeat this. I'll tell you in a second. So in other words, just like we said before, if you remember, you said before that because Malchus is rooted in Lo Yada, meaning beyond knowledge, that's why it doesn't manifest in any type of shape and form. Same thing in a smaller sense, you could say Chochmah. Chochmah's ayin, its sense of that, why it's so concentrated into a spark. Why is it only a spark? Why can't I just get a full blown idea? It doesn't work that way. Because it's connected to its source, and its source is an ayin. The real focus of the source is the divine element in it, not your understanding of it. Now, we need it to come down to being an expansion, but it's rooted in a type of, like in that same thing I said earlier when we spoke about why a child, when the conception takes place, it concentrates one cell, two cells. Why can't God make it? As soon as there's a fertilization, okay, that's it. The child pops out like he did Adam and Chava, because many reasons. One of the reasons, of course, because the soul and body have to learn to grow with each other and has to be in kelim, in a process. But there's another reason, because you want when the intensity of that divine experience doesn't leave room for kelim. It's just like the energy is there, and just a drop of a kelim. That's why you have akudim b'klei echad. The energies, because imagine you're standing in front of the most awesome experience and you're able to have the presence of mind to explain it, means you didn't get it. There's a moment where you just have to lose yourself entirely in the experience. And if there's too much yes there, either the experience will be compromised or so you need to have that type of that moment really has basically where there's a lot of there's very little kelim. That's the bottom line. You're right now in a state of so Chochmah's ayin, its sense of ayin, its ma comes from the ayin of keser shenimtze bein hanetzalim. So in other words, keser is embedded into the 10 spheres, a piece of itself, in the awe, the aha element of Chayachma, of Chochmah. That's what he's saying right here. Now again, he's not explaining this, I'm taking from other places, but this is what he means. The Makom Mokim, 1 second. So now he's really asking a question. You just said that the Chochmah is Yesh, Ma'ayin Timotza, it comes from Ayin. And where's the real bittul in Malchus? Isn't Chochmah also a nekudah? Yes, it's a yud. So the answer is no. But there's two nekudahs. There's a nekudah that has shape. It's still the shape is a nekudah. Its shape is still bittul, but the bittul has shape too. Like I remember a guy in yeshiva telling me that he was by Rabbi Nissen and he went there to learn how to daven. So I said, how was it? He said it was nice, but it wasn't as geschmack as he wanted it to be, as pleasurable. So I said, maybe davening is exactly that. It shouldn't be so pleasurable. So he says, even bittul has to have a little pleasure. I remember him saying that. So there's even non-pleasure has to also be pleasant. So I said, there's no hope for you. You want it for shleimus, in other words. You want to be more complete. Anyway, the point is, so yud of Chochmah is bittul, but it's a tzir. Then there's the yud of Malchus, or keser Malchus, and keser same thing Malchus, that has no shape at all. Now he doesn't say it as a question, but he's saying, but elsewhere it explains that even the yud of Chochmah also has the ayin of keser. So he says, and now he says, nevertheless, it has a taste of the ayin of keser, of the total selflessness, but it's still an ayin bittul that comes through Chochmah. In other words, there is a wisdom. It's not like I'll give you an example. Maybe you can help me with an example. I'll tell you my example I would use. There's two. You could have bittul, like you get a great idea, and you're not focusing on the idea. You're not focusing that you got it. You're focusing that God blessed you with it, or the idea, the wow, unbelievable. Like saying that must come from a very divine place. So there's a bittul, but the bittul is through the shape of intelligence. It was an idea that evoked it. It wasn't just. Then there's a bittul of Malchus. Real Kabbalah cell of Malchus doesn't need even wisdom. It's just you recognize a divine bittul, not because it came through an idea. So even though the idea is saturated with the bittul in Chochmah, there's a bittul without it. I'm just trying to find examples of it. I mean, it's examples when we suddenly have a feeling like that, even though there was nothing, not because we had a revelation. Maybe it's something like this. Maybe you can compare it. I don't know if it's a good comparison. Some people are blessed with something, and some people are just arrogant and take it for granted. Others recognize, and they acknowledge in a real way God for my blessing. But then there are people who acknowledge God even without the blessing. That would be even a bittul that has no shape. So here it's a shape. Their bittul has taken on the shape of Chochmah. So it's something that you've gotten, but you recognize the ayin in it. There are probably many examples. You could find many models of these two types of ayin. They're both necessary, by the way, because we need it in existence. Remember, we spoke earlier that Yaakov made a matzeivah before he made a gal, and then there's Yaakov's the hamshachas that he did before the. You need both. You need bittul in mitzias. You need bittul outside of mitzias. So you need it everywhere you go.
Bittul just key.
You see why I'm going so slow? Because look, every line here is not explaining, and it needs explanation. It's very hard to read this without. I'm sure this chapter was written in the second, because it's so concentrated, so different than other chapter style where he explains everything. Here it's so.
Unless he wrote it at the first part.
We're still in.
It's possible, but
We're still in this big parentheses.
No, we are. Yes, he's right. Yeah, till chulu, till canal. Good point you made. Well, like some people say, my whole life is in a parenthesis. Better than exclamation point.
But it's not as good as the nekudah.
That's cool. What do you think? Like, if someone could look at their lives and say, which years of your life was a parenthesis?
It could be a whole chapter.
It's not going to look like a grammar. It's going to be much larger.
Right, exactly. Well, some people say, well, my life is a parenthesis within a parenthesis. Someone else's parenthesis. Okay, that's interesting. You're right. I'm glad you pointed that out. Because so kochen on this. Maybe that's why this parenthesis may have been added afterwards. That's the thing. It's interesting. Okay.
I don't understand. One of the things I haven't understood the whole time is
only one.
Why did Yaakov tell Lavan to build a gal or matzeivah? Why does he need two of these? If it came from Lavan on his own initiative, okay, you can understand it. It's Klippa wanting somehow some type of...
It's a good question. I'd rather answer this at the end because he may say something. If you want me to speculate right now, I would say it's probably because you need the gal both from Mamai Lamata and you need Yaakov who's bringing down the energies. You need a matzeivah to draw the energy down, and you need Lavan who's below Klippa to create a path, a channel back. So he wanted but an open channel, not a closed channel. That's why you need both. So it's like Yaakov the tzaddik is bringing the channel into Atzilus into Biyah, and now you Biyah go ahead and build a channel to me, to elevate it. But instead, Lavan went and then created a what do we call it? He blocked it instead of he opened it.
So
that would be my so-called inclination.
So Yaakov's idea was Lavan's matzeivah was supposed to be the sort of like the source of the ability, the channel for tshuva?
Yeah, absolutely. Tshuva, tefillah, anything that elevates from klippa to kedusha.
They made it with a code to be unscrambled.
Yeah. And remember, even Lavan's blocking didn't help completely, or else we'd be in big trouble. But it helped enough. We're still in goals, so I guess. He stopped up. What would you say when someone builds a tunnel and the other person stuffs it up? That by the Be'eris also, the Yitzchak. That they stuff the plishtim, they block up the wells. Yeah. Listen, there are channel openers and there are channel closers. Which one are you? You're going to open channels, you're going to close channels. Okay, let's continue. Yeah. Here we go. And like the level of the seeing of Chachma, Riyah de Chachma. This was also brought a few pages earlier. What was Riyah de Chachma, remember? It was in the bottom here somewhere. Riyah de Chachma. Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, man. Much earlier than I thought. Yeah. Remember the piece about Asagan Alemus? She said like the Chacham be'etzem chei chachmosei, so he's like almost like sees it. And he can't explain it to other people. That's the last time he brought it. The bottom of page Tzadik Zayin, the bottom of Kuf Pei Zayin. Yeah. He with a lot of Yegiya he could say Dvarim, he could say something short of it. The Chacham Mevim B'daite. Yeah. I'm just I don't know if it's connected. She says Riyah de Chachma means when wisdom, when there's a certain type where you almost like see it. Like you visualize the idea. Okay, so that's the chachma. So it's still chachma. At the end of the day, it's a very deep bittul, a very deep recognition of truth, but it's still in the shape of a nekudah, basically. Ayin, the nekudah malchus, ubchinas heder, ve'ein v'ayin be'etzem, ve'ein b'chinas muhus bittul. And the ayin of malchus, however, by contrast, is heder. There's nothing there. You're talking about a new moon. You're talking about nothing. Not a drop of light. Chachma, you can't say there's no light. There's a spark of light. It's a very intense spark. You see, you recognize something. There's recognition. In malchus, it's heder. Ayin be'etzem. Fundamentally, at the core level, it's ayin. Ayin b'chinas mahus bittul. Okay. So 1 second. But now we still have we're missing something. Well, now we need to have revelation in this malchus. We don't want it to stay in a nekudah because it's empty. So where does that come from? So that's what he's concluding the parentheses. In order to the expansion, and the revelation in malchus that makes it from a nekudah into a matzeivah. That comes from atzmus ein sof. This concludes the parentheses. So let me this last piece here. Why was it so negay to emphasize this bittul? The mashal. Okay, so it comes from there because like the king, there's okay, I got it. He's basically saying, he's connecting it to the whole yesh ma'ayim with love and oh wow, man alive. How I would explain it would be simply put like this. Simply, it's not so simple. Evan Sapir, that goes back to that. Spheres reveal the transparent channels to the air, to the divine, all the way to the source. So their transparency, that's kalim. The kalim are like that. The levushim, on the other hand, are concealers. 1 second. Yaakov takes the Evan, which is malchus, which is the end, that's where the kelim are, and there's no kelim at all. It's complete concealment. So that senses an element of ayin from atzmus. Completely, in other words, complete bittul, not the bittul of chachma. And then, in that, you have also the qualities of all the revelations. That's making it into matzeivah. So you're revealing all the revelations. That's Gilei Helam. I don't know if you understood what I just said. The bottom line, the sphere of malchus, which has nothing, no substance of all, is filled with all the spheres, which in turn are transparent channels. So the bittul of malchus reveals atzmus, and the revelations in malchus reveal even a deeper level because you have to go deeper to bring it into malchus. Mm-hmm. That's what he said. That's what I think is the connection.
What's a matzeivah?
A marker, a monument, a monument. We say matzeivah is like we do a tombstone. It's a monument. So you take a stone, a loose stone on the ground. No, 1 second. You take a stone on the ground, a loose stone on the ground, and you put it, you position it. So people see, like when they come later, they'll see this is not just a stone in the street; it's a marker. It could be, it doesn't even have to be on anything. It could be a boundary marker, exactly. It looks like upright. Yeah, there's an element of a stone lying down, and you're making it upright. So let's say it's a big stone, so you could see clearly that someone put it up here. It becomes, matzeivahs were not made by companies once upon a time. They were made by people. They took a stone and they shaped it and they make it like a marker that here lies God, punitman. That's what a matzeivah really was. But here matzeivah doesn't mean negative in the death sense, more of the sense of a marker to know that something happened here. There's also in halacha probably when you keveya before you build you keveya something there. There's dinim about this. So I think it's showing that I was here and I made a mark. It's a certain time, yeah. So the point did you understand, guys, what I just said?
The last point about when you
now I'm trying to connect. Why is he bringing all this? I was thinking, why is this so negeya? Because you have here like this. It goes both ways. Let's go back to what I said about Gilei Helam and Yesh Ma'ayin. The Gilei Helam thing reveals the divine in a close way. Like you say, Mahu Chanon Afata Chanon. Just like God is compassionate, so too you should be compassionate. So you're creating a similarity to the divine. The Talmeinu Kid Museinu. We're creating the divine image. That's a Gilei Helam thing. Now, in truth, even that compared to Atzmus is Yesh Mayim, but there's an element of compatibility.
In very Rabbi words, it's what we have in common.
Yeah. Well, God chose that we should have. He created us in His image to bring godliness into the world. Then there's another element, the distance. This world reveals also that God is beyond everything. Ohr reveals closeness. Ohr does not reveal beyond. This world reveals a beyond, that Atmos is beyond anything. And that's also necessary, because while you're saying, I'm emulating God in this world, you also have to know, God is God and I'm me. I'm not God. This isn't pantheism. It's like a shliach. You take your independent faculties, so you begin like biyah, separate. You align them to the mishaleach, and now shluchim shalom kameseh. So you have to be a bar das b'fnei atzma. You have to be separate. That part of separate of you is yesh ma'ayin from the mishaleach. You're not his child. You're not his servant. That shliach has to be separate. But when you choose to become his shliach, then you're starting to convey his message. Then you are Gilei Helam. Then you're revealing what he wants you to reveal. So, and at the same time, you remain separate. So the separate has a quality that, first of all, always know you're not the Mishalech. Don't deceive yourself. And number two, there's something about a separate entity connecting to Mishalech that a child cannot do. The fact that you're separate reveals the power of the Mishalech, because he could even inspire someone that's a separate entity, meaning that even the Yesh can become. So this is really the story of what's going on here. Malchus has the element of the Yesh. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say the Yesh. Has the element of no Giluyim. There's no Giluyim in Malchus. So it's completely bottle. There's no revelation there. Chochmah is a Yesh, like he said. It has a personality. But being Malchus is completely bottle. But that's not the goal. The goal is that it should be revealed.
Chochmah inside it.
Right, exactly. And so each one, so Malchus initially reveals, where does Malchus come from? He says, Lo Yoda. Why does it have no substance? Because it comes from a place of beyond substance. Okay, but then that's Chetzenius Radlo. But then you want to have the Panemius of Radlo. You want to have Giluyim. How do you have Giluyim? So the king, by a simcha, by you doing the Yechudim, the king at the joy, suddenly exposes a whole other part of himself. And now that's coming revealed, right? Coming the Gilei Helam. Exactly. But on the other hand, you have another thing that Malchus has, the Chochmah. Chochmah has a Yesh in it. So even the Ayin of Chochmah is still not existence. I'm sorry. Even the Ayin of Chochmah is already more Yesh than Malchus has. I would even say that in some ways Malchus is more Yesh, in some ways Chochmah is more Yesh. Malchus is more Yesh, not because that's Yesh, because there's no revelations. Right. And Chochmah is more Yesh because it is a substance, it's intelligence. So basically you're getting Atzmus and Giluyim and Atzmus. Yeah. You're getting Etzem and Giluyim, and you're getting Giluyim and Etzem. You're getting basically Yesh Mayim and Gilei Helam and Gilei Helam Yesh Mayim. It's amazing.
It's a lot of fun.
Huh?
It's a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
Well, that's what the Rabbi says. That's the whole avodas of our avodas, to make. What did the Rabbi say about Mashiach? Oros of Torah became.
Yeah.
The whole thing is this is the
exactly. You see, what's bothering me? Why is it so important to talk about this whole parentheses? But that's what it comes down. So it comes from a higher place.
Of these two levels.
Now all of this is a parentheses. Let's go back now.
There's a parenthesis. I thought this was the Iker.
Who says the parentheses is not the Iker? That's the story. It goes like this. My life is a parentheses, and then I find out the parentheses is the Iker.
So you had a good life.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
No, is Chochmah the parentheses or is Malchus the parentheses? Is Mitzias the parentheses or is Bittul the parentheses? We're not really sure. It depends who you ask. Depends what level you're talking about. It basically comes down what you are. Like it says in some places, whatever your comfort zone is, then that's not the place to be. If you're comfortable in the bittul, you need mitzias. If you're comfortable in mitzias, you need the bittul.
But is this whole thing?
You can never be satisfied.
Is this whole thing a difference in quantity, meaning that there's a level where you're so close to the Abisher that you're considered a Giloi Helam, and when you're quantitatively you reach a distance where you're so far away, but it's still the same relationship. It's not a new qualitative difference, but then you become.
But I think,
or are there two different cobs here? A qualitative difference.
I think it's all four, all both quantity and quality on both levels.
Quality. There is something changes in its essence.
Yeah.
In its essence.
In other words, well, I don't know what you mean by quantity. When you talk about the world compared to Atzmos, how do you mean by quantity? There's no quantity. It's qualitative.
Well, we were saying that
the numbers when I speak about
the world of Atzilus, you're so close to God or above Atzilus that you feel the Or, you're totally.
But maybe that's mostly quality. That's not quantity. Why is that quantity? How do you see quantity in that?
Because it's a different.
It's either qualitative similarity.
Sources of light. Then it's one is not just a extension.
Okay, maybe we're using the wrong word. What me quantity means the tangible volume and distinction of the multitude of existence. That's for me quantity.
That's flat physicality.
Right. If you took quantity, that's quantity. That's we discussed number, quantity. That's why number in Elam Haz is a negative thing, because you're focusing on the period. You're 1, you're 2, 3, 4. That's why we don't count people. But then there's a count in Kedusha, where you're not counting the 1, 2, 3. You're counting the value of the individual. So really, their quality. It's a whole. Yeah. You're basically.
Quality too. It has to be a separate line. Sure, because that stone that we were talking about earlier, that's the stone before it becomes part of the base of Mikdash. It has complete bittul. That stone.
Yeah, but it doesn't have Giluim. But it's.
You mentioned the stone before it became part of the base of Mikdash. It is totally bittul to Eish, just as much as when you took that stone and lifted it up and put it into the base of Mikdash. But you just said that there is a difference between the two stones. There became a difference. One became like the Sefer Torah you were explaining, how it became part of the
Yeah, because
the same stone, but just because the mere placement of it in the base of Mikdash versus on the ground changed it in a qualitative sense, not just quantitative. There has to be a separate.
100%. 100%. It's 100%. It's not just, and it's not just revelation. The stone in the base of Mikdash is now a Kaddish, and this is Chayil. They're
Right, so it's a qualitative distinction.
Absolutely qualitative. I'll go a step further. That you could say from Atzmos, maybe there's no difference between one stone and the next, but from us, there's definitely a difference. But even in Atzmos, there's a difference at the end also, because since by us there's a difference, also you have to say by Das Elyon there's a difference. But that's not. We're going too far now. We're going off. Let's just go back there. So let me go. I'm going back to before the parentheses. So what do we have? Basically, Yaakov is taking an Evan, the nekudah of Malchus, and lifting it. Hakamas Malchus. That's the word. The uplifting. The standing up of Malchus. Partzuf. So he took a nekudah, that's what he said. The Evan is Yud. How's it going there? Huh? You following? Yeah, he says, I'm reading the beginning of the chapter. This is the Miut HaKelim. And binyan Malchus is that it should be able to receive the energy. And this parenthesis, keser Malchus.
It's not you.
It is a yud. He keeps saying yud. Different yud. It's a nekudah that's not a shape.
Kotel shel yud and yud. See.
Malchus is a nekudah. It's a yud, but it's the yud without a shape. It's 2 levels of yud. Okay, there's the 2 elements when you say a point. You could say a point is that nothing is there, and the only way we can call it is a point. That's Malchus. Yeah. And then there's a point that already has some. That's it. It's 2 ways to define point, basically. In math, you usually define point only as just as infinite points in a line. So, but you could have a point where you just. You're making a point just to because you have no other way to describe that it's nothingness. So that's the reason you call it nekudah. He said shakrus. He says a level of shakrus. Okay. I'll just go back to the present. Okay, there we go. So the Sheirish Hamshach is from Atik. Now, after the parentheses. And being that it came from Atik, from a higher place, that's why there was an uplifting. Kima, a raising of. Yeah, to stand it up. To stand it upright. Of Malchus, that a malchus shouldn't just remain on a nekudah, a stone that just basically lifeless. Total bittul. But that it should come alive, it should come permeated in an internalized way. It should come, from the inner and core of the infinite divine light. And now we'll understand this is also why the hakama, this hakama matzeivah. Hakama matzeivah is what they call it, unveiling. But here we're talking here, not hakama matzeivah, we're talking here the lifting up of the stone, the establishing it, of the monument. Is through Yaakov, because Yaakov is the middle rod. You're familiar?
Yeah.
In the Mishkan. Right. In the Mishkan you have the walls, the areas, are connected one to another. So they have a rod that connects one wall to another. Then you have a briach hatichin, hamavriach min hakotza lakotza, the pasuk says. And there was one rod, even architecturally, that ran along the whole length and width of the Mishkan that connected all the walls together. That's the briach hatichin, the middle rod that connects them all. And runs mavriach min hakotza el hakotza, from one end of the length to the other end of the Mishkan. And the other rods are only go wall to wall. Now, if you structure it vertically, it goes like this. So one rod goes from keser, das, teferes, yesod, malchus, and the other ones are short rods. Chochmeh, chesed, netzach, bina, gvura, hoid. It's really like the structure of the human being. The spine would be the briach hatichin. It runs along the whole length, and then your right arm, left arm would be like the shorter rods, chesed and gvura. The right leg and left leg would be netzach and hoid. And then there's the center, which is the keser, the bina, the das, the heart. Teferes is the heart. Then comes yesod and malchus, which is the center. But Yaakov is briach hatichin. Avram is chesed, right side. Yitzchak is gvura. The middle one is always the balancing one. A table has to have three legs. It's the third leg. In architectural structures, you'll always find there's the centrifugal force. So that's the briach hatichin. Harihu mamshim b'bchinas pnimiyus hakeser. He, Yaakov, is the one that draws down from the inner keser shu'in habrachim ele'ela. That's the lashon hazayer, if you remember from Vayakel. Drawing down the bracha, this blessing from above. That's the level of keser. Liyes is pashtusa dahi nekudah. That this nekudah, which means malchus, should be expanded. Just in case you were worried, as we shall discuss later. By the way, this is almost short part of Vayishlach Ayin Hey. I looked it up. That's where it's discussed. Remember, we didn't find it.
It says Ayin Gimel.
Ayin Daled.
Ayin Daled.
I'm still in the middle of learning it. It is. It's B'Shal Shekdim, volume 2. Part of Vayishlach Ayin Hey. There's no part of Vayishlach Ayin Daled. I want to make sure. I still learn it inside, but I'm almost sure that's where the discussion is. Okay. So this is why Yaakov does this. You understand? He's the one that's bringing down. So Malchus, the Evan, was there before Yaakov was there. The Evan is the world as it stands before Yaakov enters. He's taking an Evan and making it into a matzeivah. He's making a partzuf out of it.
Partzuf,
right. Oh, got it. Okay, fine.
Matzeivah is a partzuf.
Yeah. Gam yesh leimer. Now we could also say. We got to end this chapter, man. This chapter I can't go more. But Gam. If that helps, great. I would say a lot more than just that, but the Meaningful Life Center gives people meaning. This is the Yaakov did more than that. Be careful with that word around here.
Some people say excuse my French. I can say excuse my English. I'm sorry.
No, it's more than just meaning. He's elevating existence. There'd be no hope for us had he not done this. It's life and death here. Gam yesh leimer. We could also say the b'chinas nekudah zeh b'chinas hamalchus k'mo shemeslabeshes b'biyah. Okay, good. Now we could also say, till now we're speaking malchus as in Atzilus. Now is another interpretation. That this malchus is the way it manifests already in biyah, by Lavan's world. The chol partzuf b'chinas nekudah legabi k'mo shu b'Atzilus. Wow. In Biyah, Malchus, even the partzuf of Malchus, even its whole expansion of it is only like a nekudah compared to Atzilus. So what does this mean? And he made that into a partzuf of Atzilus, I guess. Okay, let's see what he means. But that's what he just said now. Right? And the nekudah is the chol partzuf b'chinas nekudah l'gabe k'moshe b'Atzilus. So till now the interpretation was it's Malchus is Evan, is a nekudah, Malchus of Atzilus. Akamas Malchus mebchinas nekudah l'asosei partzuf. That's the language of Meorei Ohr. The Yaakov took the Evan, which is a nekudah, Malchus, and raised it, lifted it up, and made it upright to become a partzuf. Now he's saying, he's talking binyan. Binyan, the Evan, is, the whole Evan is, even the partzuf is like a nekudah. He's explaining the Meorei Ohr in a different way. Let's see where he goes here. The neighbor Meorei Ohr kosov, because now in Meorei Ohr it says the Evan who yud the adnai. That Evan, before we just said the Evan is a yud. Now he's saying the Evan is the yud of adnai. In other words, the name Adnai. Huh?
Last yud.
Yeah. Not Yud Kevovke, but Yud of Adnai, which is the last Yud. If you do the Shem Adnai, who bechinas nekudas hamalchus hayredis lebriya, and it's known that the name Adnai is hamalchus is not how it stands in Atzilus. I'll soon explain what this means in more psychological terms, but the way it's in Briya, how it descends in Briya. Va'inyan hu. The inyan in this is the liyah she'en erech briya legab Atzilus. Being the inyan in this is being that there's no erech, there's no commonality, there's no proportion between briya compared to Atzilus. Gam b'kinas malchus Atzilus, even compared to malchus of Atzilus, even the lowest sphere in Atzilus is a big distance, big jump to briya. She mida achas midas Atzilus b'kinas alakus, because malchus is one of the midas. At the end of the day, Malchus is with the last, but one of the midas, one of the attributes of Atzilus, which is at the level of divine. Remember when I said divine? Divine means it's an identity, but it's completely aligned to the divine. Okay. Being that Malchus and Atzilus is a divine, it's behechich. You have to say that Malchus has to, its energy, its light has to be concealed, that it should only be one nekudah, only one point. And then there can be a transmission and an emission and a transmission from Malchus to create and to bring into being the creatures Bal Gvul of Briya. We'll soon explain. Let me just read it and then understand. We'll go. This is what Razal say in Chulin, famous story. So what do you have? That Vayivra Hashem Lakim Shnei Meres Agdelim. He created two great luminaries. And a pasuk later it says, the same pasuk. There's the Meorei Ohr and the Meorei Ohr. What's going on? First he says Shnei Meres Agdelim, two great luminaries. And now he's saying one is great, one is not. So the Gemara says, the Levana, when he saw that what happened here, came to God and says, you cannot have a king with two crowns. So God said, you go ahead and diminish yourself, and you become the smaller one. So yes, we'll have a king with one crown. Will be the son. And then God says, this is where we say, God regrets and says, bring therefore a korban or a shchedish to atone for me for the diminishing of the moon. This Gemara is the foundation of pages of Kabbalah and definitely Chassidus. There's a whole sefer called Shnei Me'eres Agdelim from Isaac Homler, just to explain this Gemara, based on Chassidus. Because it's all about Malchus, basically. Malchus and Zoh were on the same level. And Malchus came and said, so Malchus says, you diminish yourself. Now you're going to be Makabel from Zoh. This is the root also of the Chet Eitzadas, Adam and Chava, everything rooted. It goes, the casualties go like this. Tzimtzum Arizhin is the first tsunami. Okay? The casualty of that is Shviras HaKelim. Shviras HaKelim, the casualty of that is Meorei Ohr, the diminishing of the moon. And the casualty of that is Chet Eitzadas. And the casualty of that is Chet HaEgel. And the rest is history. And we're here trying to deal with all those.
Can you explain it in terms of Tzimtzum?
But Tzimtzum Arizhin is the root of.
Can you explain that?
If you want the real culprit, you got to go straight to the.
Tzimtzum Arizhin in these terms?
I could, But let me finish the chapter, and then I'll try to explain it all. Because I want to see where he's going here. So this is Lech Ma'atis Asmi, because this is now Malchus is going into Biyah. Ki kedei shehu hamalchus shetehei hamalchus b'chinas reish l'shoalim. Wow, is this dense? Okay, it's another Mishnah. You know, the Mishnah says Al tehei Adam zon of larayis el reish l'shoalim, or sometimes the opposite. Right, Al tehei reish l'shoalim el zon of larayis. The better be a tail of a lion than to be a head of a fox. So what does this mean? It means better to be a tail of a great people than to be a head of fools. Like they say, who's a greater fool? The king of the fools. Is the greater fool or less of a fool than the fools? You could argue about that. You know, is there more fool? A king of fools? Or is he smart enough to be, you know? Bottom line is like this. So when you say Reish L'Sha'alim, that's how Malchus already becomes the head. It's like keser. Malchus of Atzilus becomes the keser of Biyah. Again, we're talking only language here. I didn't explain that one. We have to explain it, but let's first. So that's what he's saying here. So the way Malchus is in Atzilus, it's still a zon of Larayis, meaning it's still a. That's what Hashem said to the Levana. That in order for you to be able to be a Reish L'Shalim, to be a head to the fox, which is a lower level than the lion of Atzilus, in Biyah, which means that the creature should be Balik Vul, finite and defined, you need to you need to have a diminishing and a concealment of the light. That's Legamri, completely. Complete concealed within itself, in its core. Levad. To the extent that it's only one point. And that's called the birth of the Levana. It's birthed. When the Levana is in the nekudah. That's Malchus and Biyah. And then it can become a makar, a root, a source, and a head, Reish L'Shalim, a head to Biyah. So based on this, L'chiyamaitis is not really a punishment. It's actually the way it was meant to be. That Malchus, in order for you to go downward, you got to diminish. Because the real meaning is, what was Malchus saying? You think Malchus was jealous of being a king and wanted the son not to be? Malchus was saying, if we're both going to be kings, who's going to bring the energy into the next levels? You have two kings here. So God said, oh yeah, okay, good point. You're the one. You become the...
So why was Malchus...
It's like both students of sitting by the great Rebbe. And say to the Rebbe, hey, two people can't be this. He says, okay, so one of you's got to bring the message there. You go.
So Levana,
that's what Levana is. At the end of the day, Levana is greater.
Levana is Levana.
So why was Malchus
I don't know,
at the end
maybe.
of the day the one called Malchus?
Because ultimately Malchus is the ultimate Malach, higher than the sun. It's true. Because Malchus has keser in it. Malchus goes lower, but it comes from higher. It's not for right here, but anyway, that's the point here. And that's why also as it becomes a partzuf in Biyah. Now Malchus starts developing in Biyah. The moon starts growing. But all that is still only a nekudah. Compared to Atzilus, the moon, even a full moon, is a point compared to the sun.
It's only a moon.
Right. Okay, so what we have now is he just explained at length the second interpretation. He's going back now to say because there it's also nekudah. And Yaakov now wants to change that. What's he going to do? Yaakov is going to take this nekudah as it's a biyah and makes that into a matzeivah. So that's the second interpretation. The first interpretation till here was that the nekudah is Malchus and Atzilus, and compared to the higher than Atzilus, it's a nekudah. And there Yaakov makes it into a matzeivah, into a partzuf. Here he's saying the same thing, but now in the lower level in biyah, which obviously makes it geschmack in a way because Yaakov actually entered into biyah, into the domain of Lavan. Remember we said before that he entered in the level of Lavan, right. And we said before that's why he was able to stop Lavan, because even there, the Seder Hadraga called them Lavan before Kedem Sheispik Lavan Lasses Agal. So that makes it even more. In other words, the deeper you go into the Elam Hazeh, the more the bitter it is. Yeah, very good. Okay. Now in this there's two levels. It's a very dense, complicated chapter, to be honest, but you got to go through it. And now in this itself, there are two levels. Ha'echad, or achas, etzem b'chinas ha'malchus, v'hi nekudah de malchus. There's the core level of malchus. And that's the point of malchus, shebekas, that pierces, v'sheveres, and breaks, as a parsa. It pierces and breaks through the curtain. V'yeredes b'reish habriya, and it descends and becomes the head of Bria, shenasis b'chinas atik l'Bria. And it becomes atik, like keser, atik of Bria, kumesh shekosav Eitz Chaim shar mem zayin perek aleph. V'yesh leimer, in parentheses, the zel shekosav ve'era es adnai yeshiv ala kisei. And I will see as God sitting on the throne. What's this? The kisei hakoved hu kachab, keser chochma bina. The glory, the kisei, the throne of glory, meaning the divine throne, is keser chochma bina of Bria. Shebetecha, within it, is lapshus b'chinas nekudas hamalchus from matzilas. So zeh shem adnai. Okay. So adnai yeshiv ala kisei. What's adnai? Adnai is the last yud of the malchus of Atzilus, and it's yeshiv. It's sitting on the kisei, on the throne. What's the throne? Keser chochma bina, because it became atik, keser of Bria. Man alive. Now I want to just see one thing, because he spoke about kisei. Remember, beginning of chapter Kuvov, he said, Evan Saper is the mus kisei. Kama Evan Saper Evan Tev. Kamar Evan Saper the mus kisei. Kisei is kes kos aleph. Okay, it's not connected. I just thought maybe. Okay, fine. So what do we have? That's level 1 in Malchus. But gam b'chinazu mistateres bebriya, and even this level, and also this level, is concealed in Bria, k'meshkos be'etz chaim, from, like he says in Eitz Chaim, the Shar Mem Zayin. So what do we have? This is Malchus itself, is a nekudah that pierces through and becomes keser atik of Bria.
Mistateres, a loss of Bria would be nullified, right? It would come back. In other words, is it still the Malchus of Atzilus? Still the higher Malchus?
It's heaven.
I don't know what you mean by heaven. One second. V'abeis, the second thing now, he says there's two levels. B'chinas partzuf ha'arasa, the expansion of its reflection. Hu shabab b'chinas slapshus mamish b'biyah. This does not conceal. This comes in a complete enclosement in biyah, b'chinas slapshus keich hapel b'nifel. Completely manifests the power of the Creator in the creation, the power of the crafter in the craft. The b'chinazu bob b'chinas halam b'hezer b'levush ha'biyah, the biyah, b'levushim the biyah, and this level comes in a complete concealment and hidden in the garments of biyah.
Also says that is.
Yeah, but it maintains its kachab. It's still keser. It's also concealed. Keser chachma bina. I'm not sure why he's telling us about these two levels, but I see the next chapter is Aveda. That means we still have to get back to Yaakov. So it's in the middle of the plot is not over. The story is not over. What I would say is, let's just establish where we are. He's spelling out the Evan. There's two elements in this Evan. But not the matzeivah yet. He's not even up to the matzeivah. So we have the first interpretation, Malchus of Atzilus, is a nekudah that needs to be expanded. The partzuf turns into a whole full-bodied entity. That's through Yaakov. Then there's Malchus as it goes down into Bria. Here, it remains a nekudah. Even its partzuf is a nekudah. Its whole entity, the Chachma being everything in it, is now a nekudah compared to its source. Okay, and that's what the meaning is, that diminish yourself. In other words, the Meorei Ohr, the birth of the Levana. So even as it becomes a head of Meorei Ohr, it remains a nekudah, a stone. It's only a stone. He's explained this stone has two dimensions to it. This Evan, this Malchus. One, how it pierces. The first stage. It's like two stages. One, the first step, how Malchus pierces and enters and becomes the crown of Biyah. That's also concealed. Still a nekudah compared to Atzilus, but it's a higher level because it's still the head of Atzilus. Then it continues on. It spreads out now. And Malchus gives its energy into the whole Bria, and there it completely encloses itself. It's basically like makif of bria and pnimi of bria, if you want to put it in different words. So the Evan, basically he wants to explain that the Evan that Yaakov came to touch represents the whole bia, both the makif of bia, both the kachab, the keser of bia, and the pnimi of bia. That's what he's basically saying, and he's going to turn all this into a matzeivah.
He's going to talk about mitzvah shem.
Right, he is, by the way. He's going to speak about that for sure. About pouring the oil, anointing it. He says it's clearly. I'll show you. It's in.
How to bring godliness down here.
Here, by the way, till chapter 112, we don't get back to this. So all this is concluded 2 chapters later. So he's really gone off. You could say, I don't say it's a tangent. I think it's all the levels we're speaking earlier, but through the story of Yaakov and Lavan. And we'll let's do the keser. Okay, keser. Yaakov was a matzeivah kelim. And Yaakov made a matzeivah, which is containers.
Trying to find that in the chapter.
No, it says matzeivah in Isis Masudarim Shein Kelim Le'ira Seichel. It's not a parsa. It's communicating something in language. That's more Evan Sapir. That's more like Kelim Evan Sapir.
Within Kedusha?
1 second. Okay, yeah. The matzeivah is still a level of Kelim. That's the point here. That's the key. Remember I spoke about Evan Sapir? So he spoke about Kelim, Levushim, and then Lavan, Levushim that become a parsa that become the Gal. Basically it goes like this. There's Eiris, there's Atzmus, Eir HaBligvul, there's the Eir HaGvul, there's the Eir in Atzilus, there's the Kelim and Atzilus that are transparent channels for the Eir, and therefore reveal the root of the Gvul, and they reveal even the root of the Bligvul, all the way to Atzmus. Then comes further down. After Kelim come Levushim, but there's healthy Levushim of Kedusha, Pareches, the curtains in the Beis HaMikdash, 13, that each one has its role. And they reveal what they have to reveal through concealing, but it's more concealment than the containers. Then comes a Lavan, the Klippa, that takes those parsois and says, you know what, let's seal it up and not let anything flow through. Yaakov is coming and taking the Malchus, the Kelim of Atzilus, or even how it enters into Biyah, and he's turning it into a partzuf, meaning that it should be a matzeivah, should be a transparent channel for the Eir. That's the point. So that's the Evan Sapir. That's what he's saying. Okay.
So is he making his own pathway or bypassing, or is he going through Lavan?
He's doing it with Lavan. He's doing it in the world of Lavan, yeah. B'Meorei Ohr Evan nekudah matzeivah partzuf. In Meorei Ohr it says the Evan is a point, and the matzeivah, the marker, the monument, is a configuration. Nekudas HaMalchus b'chinas keser Malchus. The point of Malchus is keser Malchus. V'shar shema'atik, here's the long parentheses in one line. It's rooted in Atik. V'yeshlem shezeh b'chinas ayin shenetzel b'atzilis. It's rooted in Atik, and we could say this is the ayin, not the yesh of Chachma, the ayin shenetzel b'atzilis. So it's a level of ayin. V'asa matzeivah b'chinas is galus HaMalchus. Ayidei hamshachos ered yalyin. And he made it into matzeivah by the revelation of Malchus, through drawing down a higher energy. Not just atik, from pnimius atik, pnimius radlo, like he said. So this comes from pnimius atik. This is not said in the chapter itself, or in general from the root and source of Malchus. What? Root and source of Malchus, not necessarily from the pnimius. The Malchus. This is the uplifting of Malchus, the raising of Malchus. We could also say the Evan of B'chinas Malchus K'moshu Biyah. That the Evan, the stone, is Malchus the way it's in Biyah. And this itself, there are 2 levels. One point that pierces the curtain and becomes the head of Bria. Second, its expansion of its reflection that enclosed the manifest in Bria Yitzir Asiyah. The next chapter I see is on Aveda. Explain this whole thing in Aveda, which will probably clarify some matters. But I just wanted to make the connection back to the kelim. So the matzeivah is the kelim, not the levushim. That's good. So the levushim is the parsa. That comes from Lovan. Lovan is connected to the levushim. So Lovan, the Elyon, is a healthy parsa because that brings down from Atzilus, from keser into Atzilus. Lovan HaTachten, the one, the Klippa, he's the one that wants to diminish and conceal and seal it. So this goes back to everything we spoke about. This goes back. Those goes back to all the levels we spoke about. So there's taking the world, taking it away from the power of klippas, from the darkness of selfishness, aligning it, then aligning it to Atzilus, aligning it to the Keach HaGvul, the root of the Gvul, till aligning it all the way to the Bligvul, all the way to Atzmus. That's the story. Okay, so we finished chapter 109. We did page 212 and 213.